What a pleasure for the Kiros Report, which had had a tentacles of names in which Professor Alan LeVines had appeared in the past, such as African Ascent, then African Ascent International, and then Excellence. And finally, I settled with the Kiros Report. Welcome for the fourth time, I think to the new brand, the Kiros Report, Professor Alan Levines. Professor Alan Levines does not need much of an introduction, and I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself beyond a few things that I must necessarily mention. That he's one of Berkeley's top-notch composers, and Berkeley itself, of course, as is well known, is the leading college for the study of contemporary music. Professor Levines is nationally and internationally recognized as a composer with continuing interest in his craft, such as bird songs, folk songs, and Japanese music, and lately venturing into Chinese music also. He has received numerous awards, the famous one of which is the Leonard Bernstein Fellowship, given to composers at the capstone of their careers. His compositions have been internationally performed, such as, for example, in the Portland String Quartet, and many, many other ventures that I cannot mention. Welcome to the Kiros Report, Professor Levans.
Thank you so much. And please include some of your credentials, which are more more than equal to mine.
Thank you so much. Well, I think I and you have been conversing for years as colleagues at Berklee College of Music, in which I invested close to 20 years of my life. And there you were my best friend, and you continue to be one, along with Victor Wallace. And how fondly I remember our self-imposed seminars twice a week on the Berkeley Cafe, in which we conversed about so many important matters, some of which were musical, others were philosophical, because you're not just a musician, but a musician with a philosophical temperament, a musician who likes to think, who likes to dissect ideas. So much so that you're one of the few musicians that I know, for example, who took the craft of translation. Because to speak any language, really, even the language between you and you now, the language between me, you, and my brilliant studio manager, Patrick, is all about translation. We hear words and we're translating them to accommodate our tastes, our inclinations, our subjective experiences, really. So that's what I would like us to talk about today. What does translation mean to you? Educate me.
Hey, you need no education. Uh, well, translation many years ago meant to me the translation of ideas from one language to another. It still means that, and I think that's its common usage to translate from uh, English to Spanish or Chinese to French. But years ago, I began to think a little more thoughtfully about what translation means. And I began to think, well, really, you and I right now are speaking English. It seems maybe no translation is necessary. But necessary or not, I believe that when you just spoke to me and asked me to speak about translation, I was translating from English to English, but that's just the surface. Why would I need to translate from English to English? Because what you mean by what you have asked me may not be what I mean by what you have asked me.
Mm.
In fact, I'm certain that what you mean by what you have asked me is not what I take it to mean. I have a different history with the words you have used than you do. And so I have to translate it in, I have to translate what you've said through the lens of my experience with those words and the ideas behind those words. That's pretty fascinating to me, and I think it goes further. And I guess to cut to the end of the query, my question would be, what is not translation? It seems that pretty much in everything in human experience must be translation. I'm a composer. I write music. I believe I'm translating when I write music. I have ideas, I have images. I want to share them, but my preferred means of sharing my ideas, images in my mind, perhaps emotions, but perhaps things that aren't emotions. Things. I have things in my mind, for lack of a better word, that I prefer to share through music. And that's a translation. I just recently, sometime in the past year, five years, wrote a set of what are called preludes for solo guitar. And the guitarist and I both were thinking about what should I write, what should be the springboard, and we settled on some paintings by Moreau. Well, Moreau's paintings speak for themselves. They are his translations of his ideas, his desires to share. And now I'm translating. I'm asking the question, if Moreau's paintings were sound works, instead of what would they look like, my question is, well, what would they sound like? And so that set of 12 preludes is a translation. But isn't it a double or even triple or quadruple translation, right?
Mhm.
There's so much, and of course, the phrase "lost in translation" seems apt. Certainly, ideas of Moreau's are lost in my translation of his ideas into sound. I'll leave it there if you wish. But I can share more. I can go on a long time about my just wondering about what is there that is not translation. Yeah, your turn.
Excellent. As always, splendidly rich and sufficiently provocative for us to begin sliding in and, as we say in the analytic tradition, break it apart and then we'll put it together again. Let me take you to a museum. And let's both imagine that we're looking at a painting by Georgia O'Keeffe. if you're familiar with that painting, the sunflower,
Not, not familiar.
in which case then
Apologies.
perhaps you're familiar with Van Gogh's bedroom.
Yes.
You are. Suppose that on a Sunday afternoon, I and you go to the museum and then we look at some Van Gogh paintings. We're both quiet, curious. We just look at the painting. We spend about 10, 15 minutes staring at it. And of course, we're not supposed to speak inside the museum, but knowing you and I, would like to think. Uh, After the 10, 15 minutes, and then we spend another hour at the museum looking around. We decide to settle down on a cafe. And then I ask you uh, what you thought of the Van Gogh painting. And of course, the only device that we have in common is language. But beyond that, I happen to be an Ethiopian, so there is a cultural dimension to me. You happen to be an American, that is also a cultural dimension that is a property to you. But what we have in common is that both of us could speak English. So we begin talking about the painting. What kind of things can we say and can we not say about the painting such that our conversation could be seamlessly transparent with minimum misunderstanding, but maximum understanding? What role does translation play in this interaction? Because not that I'm going to translate my impressions of Van Gogh extracted from that museum with your abstractions. And the extractions of our perceptions and impressions need not necessarily be the same, but we're both looking for meaning, what we've gotten out of the painting, and we want to share it with one another. What are some of the complicating factors that translation plays in this human interaction between two friends?
Well, I don't believe we have any problem really sharing our impressions. Maybe I share that I like a particular shade of yellow that's in the painting, and you say, Yellow's not my favorite color." We've I think made some meaningful communication there. Maybe you say that you think it's interesting how he creates depth perception in the painting, and I say, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I agree with you." We've, I think, managed to communicate something meaningful at that point as well. But I think that from my musings about translation over maybe now 20 years, certainly 10, I think that that's relatively superficial, which I think is where most of what we share, not just you and I, but all of us, I think it's where most of what we share lies. It's superficial, and that's, I'm not judging that. I'm not saying that superficial is bad and profound is good. I'm just making an observation. In fact, if I was pressed, I would probably say, how could we survive without the superficial? uh, but uh, but I'm just, as you know, and I know you're the same. I'm a relatively curious person, but maybe even obsessively curious person, and so let's say we go back to me saying that I sort of liked the shade of yellow in the painting, and you said you didn't really like yellow. Well, I would I would propose that you've never seen any yellow the way I have.
Mm,
You've only seen yellows the way you have.
correct.
If you had the opportunity to see yellows the way I have, perhaps you would like yellow at least enough to like the yellow in that painting. Conversely, I've never seen yellows the way you have, only the way I have. And if I have had the opportunity for a lifetime of seeing yellows the way you have, I perhaps would not like yellows. So that's where I think that I come back to translation,
Yes.
right? I talked about the yellow in the painting. You have no choice but to translate what that word means to you into your experience with that word and its meanings for you. You can't you can't relate to what I'm saying about the yellow in the painting the way I do, and vice versa. Right?
Huh?
So yeah, it
Suppose,
raises questions to me about the possible impossibilities of objectivity.
hmm,
And I think translation and objectivity, subjectivity are intertwined with each other very, very greatly.
what a great response. Uh, let's go deeper now
Hmm.
into a very controversial territory that you just raised, namely objectivity and subjectivity. Suppose that relative to my mental frame and my anatomy, a culturally nuanced anatomy and belief system, I try to convince you that there is something called yellow in the vortex of my brain, which translates a perception of yellowness into a yellow color that is common to humankind, from which we can all draw, such that there is only one color called yellow, and only that, and insist on that. How would you correct me? How would you challenge me?
Oh, well, I think that I think you would have been very successful at provoking me to argue with you. um, well, I've shared with you in the past that that I'm drawn to Wittgenstein, and I'm impressed by how how careful he is in his thought processes. And I've shared that one of my favorite works of his is a very short booklet called Remarks on Color. And we are talking about color. Uh, and the only weakness I can see in that discussion is the very first statement, and he's well aware of it. He is, I think, arguably given no choice. Would not be able to start if he didn't start with that weakness. And the first thing he says is, "There are objects." He starts from there. So, in order to carry on his discussion about color, he has to start from that premise without proving it. But I think the rest he proves quite sufficiently. And uh, to distill one of the more, I think, provocative ideas that comes out of Remarks on Color is that color is, in fact, not objective. And basically, putting it more simply than he does, and perhaps not quite as robust as he does, but to put it more simply than he does, how can I know when you see red? We'll switch colors. Oh, let's stick with yellow. Uh,
That's
how how can I know that when you tell me that apple is red, and I see the apple and I think that it's also red, how can I know that the red that you are seeing is the red that I'm seeing? I cannot know this. I cannot know. I mean, I'm seeing red. I agree with you that it's red. But I don't know that you're seeing the red that I'm seeing. It's
that's
not a possibility for me to see the red that you're seeing in your brain. I can only see the red that I'm seeing in my brain.
but suppose I say to you in frustration, angrily, internally angry, but controlling it and saying to you, "What's wrong with you, Alan? I and you are made
Many things.
human heart, I'll tell you. Why is it that you cannot see redness, which is innately implanted in your brain, from which you can extract and recognize something red, something yellow? Were
Mm,
it not for the embedded presence of these two colors, redness and yellowness,
mm,
inside your brain, which is essentially similar to that of mine, because our anatomical structures are essentially the same, and then recognize something that is red because it represents redness that is implanted inside your brain, and yellow because that too represents a yellowness. What's wrong with you, Alan?
mm.
You have to check yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe I'm just far too skeptical, far too cynical, but I believe there's a possibility that if somehow I could see that red apple and that yellow apple through your retina, through your optic nerve, and through your neurons. I believe there is a possibility that I might be shocked by what I saw. I'd like to see there's a greater chance that I would not be shocked than that I would be shocked. Perhaps, as with many things, the reality would lie somewhere in between. And I would go looking through your retina all the way into your neurons. I would go, wow, that's a red apple and that's a yellow apple. But it's a different red and a different yellow. I've seen those reds and yellows before, but not on apples. Perhaps something like that would be the reality if some magic allowed me to see what you see. Or it could be extraordinarily shocking. There's a small possibility, I believe, that I would go, ah, so so you call purple red, or at least my purple seems to be your red, and your red seems to be my yellow. Wow, remarkable. Perhaps it's all mixed up like that across humanity. We don't know, and we can't know, and that makes it subjective.
Might it also be the case that what we call red and what we call yellow, which you have deciphered so subtly, might be that. But additionally, I'll say to you, I wonder if the fact that we see shades of redness and shades of yellowness relative to our unique anatomical compositions, our retinas, so on and so forth, are nothing more than outcomes of conditioning. I wonder,
Makes sense to me.
does it?
Yes, I mean, you at a young age were shown various objects by your family, and part of your education about those objects as young as 1 or 2 was that's red. And same for me. Doesn't mean that we are seeing the same red. Doesn't mean we're both seeing what other people would call red. It just means that we're conditioned to realize that in our own personal experience as red.
Incredible. Let me now speak experientially, and I know you're going to dissect this brilliantly. When my son was 5 years old, we were having a conversation in the car, and I asked him what his color is. He told me it's chocolate orange.
What's the car is that color?
Color, color.
What is?
What color? What's your color? Describe your
Oh,
color.
his own color. Ah, yeah, yeah,
Color.
yeah, yeah.
He said, I'm chocolate orange.
Hmm.
I wonder what he would say now that he's 13 years old, when the world has already narrated him.
Hmm.
Because that self-description, it struck me as a philosopher, was pre-socialization, or when the socialization was not so deep, and there was an innocence, an honesty, which led him to think that his skin color is chocolate orange.
Hmm.
I haven't reminded him of this. Perhaps I should. He's 13 years old now. I wonder if he still thinks that way, Alan.
Hmm.
I'm speaking very ambiguously because
Yeah.
I want to go into this fake territory that the media likes to sensationalize. The Kiros Report is not about sensationalizing ideas, it's
Hmm.
about examining them.
Hmm.
So I thought that would be of interest to you
Absolutely.
via a Wittgensteinian lens.
Well, I first of all, I think uh, his his viewpoint of his color at what you said, 5 or so,
He was 5 years old.
5, is wonderful in its crystal clear communication. It's specific. It's and I think, yeah, it's pre to some degree, to some meaningful degree, pre-socialization, uh, and certainly by now he's heard less poetic descriptions of his color. Uh, Seems like he was in a very healthy place at 5.
I thought so, Alan.
Yeah, I think he was.
Very, very healthy. Yeah.
I don't have further thoughts on it, but it, as so often in our conversations, it reminded me of something I hadn't even thought of sharing, and one of them involves a child. Two things. One of them involves a child. But first, uh, I before Wittgenstein and after Wittgenstein, I was interested in color, and I've only become more fascinated with color as time goes on, and I heard a conversation where a historian, I think it was a historian, anyway, someone was talking about uh, color in history, and how, if we go back to the earliest writings from whatever culture you wish, that not all the colors are there that we have now. And for that matter, if we talk about just now, I'll go back to the history in a moment, but it reminded me that if we talk about now, from one culture to the next, the basic set of colors is not agreed upon. For example, in Russian culture, there is a color that is not in Western European culture or in US culture. That is azure. And you might say, oh, well, yeah, I know what you mean by azure. But the point is that in Russia, it's not a blue,
Hmm.
It is its own color. It's not conflated from their point of view with blue. It's azure, right? And but historically, blues have been the last to appear in any major culture's literature. And something that really caught my attention in this discussion was that this person had studied color in Homer.
Mm.
There is no blue. Isn't that amazing?
It is.
To to me as a 21st century person, it's like I've always known blue. Why didn't Homer know? I mean, he's smarter than me.
What happened to the anatomical structure? What happened to the
Yeah, right.
embedded
And
blueness?
and it's not like he doesn't talk about blue things. He describes the sky, he describes the sea, but they are not blue. They are a number of other colors, but blue is not one of them that he uses to describe blue, what we would call blue things. Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm. So if we met Homer and wow, what a I think we'd both, maybe fall over with a heart attack if we did. But if we met Homer uh, and we talked about blue with him, he would educate us, of course, that it's this other thing.
Incredible, Alan. And I'm so provoked that I have to humbly share this with you.
Okay.
In a forthcoming trilogy consisting of three novels that I have written, one of which is published, Cambridge Days,
Yes.
followed now by A Passionate Man, and then another one, another novella called Darky. I take a character out of Cambridge Days who was a manic depressive, an artist, a painter who died unrecognized. I resurrect him in the second novel called A Passionate Man. And then I make him blind, physically blind, but simultaneously, spiritually not blind. The physical blindness was a function of the body, the physical eyes. When I resurrect him, he loses the physical eyes, but they are replaced with the soul of the eyes, I call them.
Mm.
And he begins to see now things that he used to see in one way with the physical eyes, totally differently. For example, he now sees what I call an orange river. In the world of the physical eyes, orange rivers would be manifestly expressions of a mental condition that one must check by a doctor. Madness. In this new world, which is being guided by the spiritual eyes, everything is reconfigured such that we can now begin to look at rivers as if they are orange, which I would like to link to our discussions of the programmatic of Homer.
Cool. Very cool.
Incredible.
Yeah.
You provoked me and you have justified me. After all, I'm not a mad writer, but a writer who is struggling with new concepts,
Mm.
which are further elaborations of translation. translation of experiences,
Yes, yes.
translations of the limitations of the physical body, and the richness of possibilities, which will lead me now to ask you to read one of your most potent statements in an article that I chose when I was a co-editor of Fusion magazine at Berklee College of Music, which led me to suggest to the editor-in-chief to publish your extraordinary piece. And there you have begun developing new ideas that are eminent in music, which is a transcendental language. First, I would like you to reread to the audience those three potent sentences and then end our episode by elaborating on them. We have about 15 minutes left. In fact, less than 15 minutes.
All right. Uh, at the risk of running out of time, which of course we're going to do anyway, uh, this a similar or a related thing to blue and to your son's poetic description of his color. A neuroscientist who studied color and knew that blue was this unusually late development in the language, not in the experience, but in the language of human beings, had a daughter, and he carefully chose not to teach her about blue.
Mm.
And I think she was 2 or 3 when he tried out his experiment. And he, said, what color is the grass? It's green. What color is this flower? It's red. And he may have, well, anyway, I perhaps have some parts of it wrong. But he pointed to the sky and he said, what color is the sky? She had no color for it. She was confused.
Remarkable.
I can send you that discussion. It's really interesting, I believe. Anyway, so yes, thank you for bringing up the article, and it was an honor for me to have this article included. So the portion you're, I think, referring to in it is, I quote a composer, Charles Ives, and to believe that music is beyond word language is Ives' proposal. That music will develop possibilities inconceivable now, a language so transcendent that its heights and depths will be common to all of humanity. But what is language? In application, is it not perpetually translation? Is it not a desire to translate thought and feeling? Is it not a desire to carry our pasts forward? I believe that's what you wanted me to
Right.
read. Yes.
Exactly right. Mm-hmm. I was intrigued by it, the depth of it.
Thank you. I'm honored.
How did this guide your compositional temperament? This gift that this neuroscientist has given you? namely that as a composer, we're not necessarily working with words, but with a language that is particular to music, that is transcultural, transracial, transsexual, perhaps even transhuman, the human as we know it to be.
Well, uh, I think you feel somewhat humble about philosophy, and I surely feel somewhat humble about music. And so I'm going to bring this maybe down to earth. The idea that music is a universal language is something I think Ives was talking about. It had been talked about before he was addressing it. Um, and of course, I think often it's stated in the context or with the perhaps unspoken assumption that verbal languages are not universal and that there's so many of them, and so that makes it difficult to communicate. And music seems to be common to all humanity, so there's a universal language. Isn't that wonderful? Well, something I share with my composition students is that, well, that sounds real nice, but I'm sorry, it is not a universal language. And in fact, there may be more music languages than there are verbal languages. And the reason that I say that is that if music was a universal language, then I'm what people call an experimental composer often. I like to joke that there are four labels I get. One is experimental, another is avant-garde, another possible label is weird, and then another possible label is that's not really music, is it? Um, so if it was a universal language, it shouldn't matter how experimental I get. I would be understood, right? But it doesn't have to do with experimental. I teach a course on different cultures' musics, and one of them is we take a peek at just one culture in Africa, the music of Ghana. And when Europeans first heard it, they were music. The early musicologist first heard that music. Well, oh, it's just a cacophony of improvisation, clearly. But later musicologists who were a little more humble began to they thought, maybe if I study this music with a Ghanaian, maybe if I learn how to play it, I'll have a different viewpoint and I'll learn how to do these improvisations. And when they did that, they found out that actually very little of it was improvised and that it wasn't a cacophony, that it was a highly sophisticated tapestry of rhythmic design beyond pretty much any rhythmic design concepts that European music possessed. So, if music was a universal language, those musicologists wouldn't have made that mistake, the early ones. No, it's not. Oh, I wish it were. I wish it were a universal language. But no, um, from one musical language to the next, we have to translate.
Remarkable. We are about to end where we began, precisely because of your architectural, systematic mind, a property that we both share. That's why we can engage in this seamless conversation anytime, anywhere, about any subject, for which I'm grateful. Now,
Twice.
before we end the episode, what would you like to share with my audience about translation for them to think about?
Oh dear. I don't think I'm prepared for that question. uh, oh, well, I guess what I would share with any of my students or colleagues, and that is try to remain curious. See if, and here's what I would share. If anyone in the audience can discover something in human experience, in human interaction, that is not translation, please let me know.
Hmm, I like that. Well, the Kiros Report, as you can see, is visibly excited to have been graced by the presence of a friend, a colleague, and a great composer whose music uh, tantalizes me. And in a future episode, I'll bring him back, and this time for him to play his compositions and translate them for the viewer. Thank you so much, Alan,
It's my
for
honor, my
sharing
privilege.
this gift with the Kiros Report.
It's a pleasure.